And then I had to get off of the traffic.
I'm just gonna. Also, I forgot to Adam Steiner, District 3 Council, who's actually the council of the ordinance district is here. And do you want to say anything, Adam? Probably not.
I'll say a little something. Yeah, so my sense in general around, I'm not a developer, I don't make money with development, I never have, and just driving around, my sense is that Framingham is at capacity. Driving from Nobscot to downtown to Holliston takes 20 minutes, half an hour. And so, but the state doesn't want to hear that, so what we need to do is think really strategically about this law and how we can, one, we can push back a little bit and say, hey, how about a waiver for all the construction that we did before this went into effect? But otherwise, how can we best implement the spirit of the law without actually causing thousands of units to be built? Because the law says we have to zone for the capability of construction. It doesn't mean we actually have to build every single apartment that they want. So think strategically about places where we could put in zoning that wouldn't result in actual construction. And that takes really careful, thoughtful consideration from people who are experts like Christine and like members of our planning board who could be helpful in this process as we go forward, and the administration. So that's my hope, is that we have enough time now. Let's get going. Let's come up with the best plan for all of them.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, let me just introduce myself. Hi, thank you. I'm Jeff Roloffs, attorney for the developers who own the approximately 30 acres of land that's sort of the topic of discussion here. Christine invited me to be here. I really appreciate that invitation. And I wanted to take the opportunity to come down to introduce myself, to hear from the neighborhood. I got the feeling that we're going to see a lot of each other over the coming months and maybe longer. Some of you may know me from having represented the Faffords in connection with what is now the Badenbrook Farm project. I also represent Doug Steffen in connection with that project. So I've done quite a bit of work in Framingham. I've always enjoyed it, and I look forward to working with you here. I know that we're going to have disagreements. That's anticipated. And it may even get very contentious. This isn't normally what I like to do on my Saturday morning, but I'm here and I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So I think what Councilor Steiner has said is basically we need to think about how we are going to create an MBTA zoning overlay map on the 26.44 acres that acres that Framingham has, or 26 miles rather, that Framingham contains, because this is going to affect every single neighborhood, every single district, the traffic flow, the infrastructure, the schools, and I know the state specifically calls out that that's not a consideration, any of those items, when we're planning this out, but it does say that the intent and spirit of this law is to create housing near where transit is within half a mile. And that is the downtown. There is opportunities for bus in the Shoppers World area, Skeen Street, Route 9. There's several areas that this could actually be applied to. Western Avenue is another one that's within probably half a mile from the walking to a train. So there's other areas that could be considered. Why Nobscot came up, other than the fact that there's a parcel under consideration. To me personally makes no sense, and I would never be in favor of putting it there. So if there's other considerations in Nobscot, there could be possibly overlaying the existing B4 zoning district without expanding it, because this will be an expansion into that. The underlying zoning, I'm just saying what could be possible. The underlying zoning would remain, and then you create a new zoning with new regulations on top of that zoning. So we have two different zoning areas and zoning regulations that would be applied to parcels. So there's other opportunities. I've actually been in contact with the person that does GIS for Framingham, so I'm gonna be coming up with some other areas that I think are possible, and they are along Route 9, expansion into the 990 corporate mixed use area, which currently does not allow residential, but I had argued for that. When we created that back when we were still a town, and it did fail, but I think at this point, because I have all kinds of documents and studies that support putting housing there from RKG back in 2016, that actually support this more so than it did then, because there is, you know, retail is not doing well because brick and mortar is pretty much going the way of the dodo bird. So you have, everybody's online purchasing. I know myself, I hardly ever go to a store except for a grocery store, and I actually use the delivery for grocery stores. So to think that we're, you know, as much as I hate taking commercial off the tax rolls, this would be a mixed use component that would add housing into commercial, and putting it up near the tech park makes sense to me because there is transportation up there. There is a need for housing for the tech park to get people to move up there so that they don't have that long commute to work. So that's one area. Western Ave, where Odessa is, you could overlay down there. That's not far from the T station. It makes sense. And there's some vacant parcels down there. Excuse me. Can you not hear me? Okay, sorry. So those are just some options. And Route 9 in front of Framingham State College, there's some parcels, they're commercial sites, but there's also housing on that site, where Phil De Palma, currently is, so we could overlay something on that. The one thing we have to make sure is that there's 5 acres, it has to be a minimum of 5 acres when you're putting in a district for this MBTA zoning. Having said that, don't anybody panic because we have time to make our amendments to this map. City Council is the authority to approve, reject, or amend any zoning article. The planning board makes its recommendation. We refer it back to the planning board. We both hold public hearings. We have 90 days to make a decision, which in this case, because December 30th, I think, it's less than 90 days at this point, so we have until the end of the year to be able to vote something in, but this is up for discussion, nothing set in stone at this point. And the purpose of this meeting was to get input from neighbors about what they want to see. So having said that, I will take hands. Yes.
Several questions. Starting with, when we went with the B4 zoning there, did we not go from ½ acre to 1 acre in that area where his client wants to develop? Wasn't that sort of a compromise? And now we're going to completely throw that out?
That parcel is not in the B4 district.
Right, but
So that
it used
parcel-
to be ½ acre zoning there. And I thought that when we went with the B4, we changed that to 1 acre zoning so that, oh, okay.
No, so the B4 zoning in Nobscot has nothing to do with the parcel in Edmands
That's
Rd. That's
always been-
R4, that's always
That's
R4,
always been 1 acre zoning?
yes.
And why does your client not just put 31 acre homes there?
Well, so I'm relatively new to the project here, but my sense in talking to my client is that they just feel like there's, you know, number one, they're developers, right? So they want to get more value from the property, that's obvious. Number two, though, this does seem to be, and this is where we're gonna start to disagree. From our perspective, and just from my initial review of things personally, it's an area where a higher density residential development seems to be called for as a transitional zone. I'm just answering the question. I don't expect you to agree with this.
200 yards up the road, there's a farm. It's not a densely populated area.
Okay,
It's a farm right on the corner, Gennardi Road.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I'm trying to answer, I'm trying to give you my client's perspective. You asked for it, so.
Can
Yes.
I throw one more sentence in? I don't even need that thing, okay? I am In addition. Okay. Just to respond to this, and Mary Beth Croce, Barbara Luso's sister, we're complicit. I'm sure you guys already know, because you live here, there's already way too much traffic in the Nobscot area. We did agree to the 150 unit building across the street. It was replacing a blighted plaza, and I never had a problem with that. It's not even built, it's not even populated. We don't even know what that's going to do to the traffic in Nobscot, which is already horrendous. We were supposed to get one more traffic lane right where they managed to plop a big ass CVS with no room for a traffic lane. We haven't even absorbed what's being built right now to even consider putting more units in the vicinity of this intersection is ludicrous.
Yes. Agreed.
Leo Stroshine Drive. I just wanted to clarify the law. So you're saying that when was the law enacted? Like. Because. Yeah, the MBTA, because I'm just, today, this is the first I'm hearing about it in the last month, probably because I'm not following politics closely. But this concept that we have 3 months to figure out where we're gonna put an increase of 10% of residents in Framingham is insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So number two, like, they want to put it all in Framingham. Wouldn't, if you were gonna do something like this, wouldn't the first thing you do is figure out the impact on the entire community, and then you would start going, step by step in that process? So what I'm hearing now is we're rushing around trying to, our development over here, we've been talking about for years, that parcel lot, a lot. And now they're gonna go, they're talking from, what was it before, I don't know, 15 per acre, which is like 100 and something. No, yeah, I don't know the specifics, but a lot more than we wanted in beer gardens to now 1,000, which is, 3,000 people, what, 1,500 cars. I mean, all this stuff. We have a school down the street that my daughter goes to that they're going to tear down. They're not replacing it. They're going to tear it down. Well, she did go there because we had to pull her out. There's mice running around the street. There's no grass in the park, in the field. Well, there's some grass. I'll correct myself. The playgrounds are falling apart. And this is the school nearest to where they want to put stuff in this part of town. They're telling us that we have a shortage of schools in other parts of town where we have to build schools across on the south side. And that the schools are just one aspect of it. Forget healthcare. We have a hospital in town where the DPH is at because there's problems with it. If you've ever had to go there, I have a child. I've never been to the hospital so much in my life, but now I'm at the emergency room, it takes 4 or 5 hours to get care there. The CVS, which I understood when they said they're gonna build it, was supposed to have a mini clinic. But it doesn't. And so we run around when you need care, either you go to the emergency room for 4 hours or 5 hours, or you dial on the phone to try to find the next place that you can go to get health care. And I'm relatively young. So people that are in emergency situations that need this, no offense, the more elderly than myself, where's their health care?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's important for that. So this is all part of where you would be evaluating the city for a city now. And we would say, well, if we're gonna add people, why, first of all, you say, why are we gonna add people? We need to add people in the community? Is that what we need?
Yeah.
To me, like if I'm gonna have a football stadium, I have the team, then I build a football stadium, and then I invite people to come. I don't have the people sitting out waiting for the football stadium to come and go the other way. And that's what we're doing here. This is crazy. So I guess I'm trying to understand the whole thing because it is really crazy. Number two, I'm suggesting that it's a law. And I said this in the other meeting, and everybody's shying away from this. Go to court.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go to court.
Yes.
At the least you delay it. And I know people are saying this isn't gonna work, we're not gonna do it. Well, what,
Right.
are we the only town in Massachusetts that doesn't have space for people? No, when I drive around. Now, I get because we have the train. This law apparently more effective. So if I wanna pull, and then I go to these meetings, and she's trying to do it, she's doing a wonderful job. I sit at the first council meeting or whatever I did last week, and I hear a lot of people talking about our fair share. And they're bidding one end of the town against the other, well, you can't put it here or there. Well, when I listen to this law, and it says it's for traffic, and we can't talk about traffic, then anybody with half common sense says we can't get almost further away from public transportation than we are in this end of town. Right? I mean, my post guy won't put my package on my doorstep because I'm rural. The federal government thinks I'm rural, sir. That's the reality of it. Now, whether that's a yard or 100 yards away from where this thing's gonna go, that's the reality of what goes on down here. Why should this community be like the other part of town, you know, for that? So that's another argument with it. I don't like being told that I'm against the town. If I have half a brain in my head, I say, you wanna build lots of people to take the train and bus, put them next to the train and the bus, where they can walk to all the services. No, first we're gonna build the houses, then we're gonna build stuff for people to walk to.
I'm
Are we
sorry,
gonna build the hospitals?
can we move on, because there's a lot of people that wanna say.
So sorry, it's just trying to make
I
sense.
know,
Paul.
but, there's so many people wanna say things. Like,
So
how about discussing the fact that it's not even zoned yet?
nothing's on yet.
Right, so
Correct.
why can't we fight that from happening? Who changes the zoning?
The city council.
Okay, so if we stop the zoning for changing and keep it as residential zoning, they put in houses there, not a complex.
So would you like to speak more?
That's all I wanna say.
And I don't want to solve the problem for the Nobscot thing. This is too much for the entire town.
We need more help.
So, Councilor, thank you for your support, and I have three questions. The first is, understanding the MBTA communities law. So my reading on that from the text itself is that Framingham has to establish at least one district of reasonable size, which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. The state has determined that's 50 acres for Framingham. Our current zoning, as I understand it, meets that requirement. We had the opportunity to submit an application to the state to confirm that has happened, that we currently are in compliance. So my first question is, has that been submitted and what was the response?
The director of the economic development department submitted that way back at the beginning of the year. So we're in temporary, or the end of last year, so we're in temporary compliance, but we have to have a firm plan that's voted and adopted by December 30th of this year. So the MBTA zoning law got enacted, I think, in 2022. It got revised in 23. The regulations changed, do you know?
I think it was 2020, the regulations came out.
Yeah, well-
And then the regulations were revised last August.
Right, but,
But I think.
so the latest rendition is 2023. The mid 2023, they actually changed the regulations. There are 177 communities that are affected by this, so we're not the only ones. And it depends on how close how many trains that you have and how many acres you have. Right now, there's 270 acres downtown. So originally, when I was the chair of the planning board, we created the CB district because we knew this law was going to be enacted. The purpose of that was to be in compliance ahead of the game, but then the rules changed in 2023. So this is where we're at right now. So we have to come up with areas that make sense for transportation to downsize vehicles, because part of the whole sense of this ordinance or this law is to get rid of vehicles. The state wants us to depend on public transportation. In Nobscot, that's not possible. There is no public transportation out here.
just gonna add the.
right, so we'll add vehicles.
Why did you just?
What was your other
Yeah, so
question?
to continue that, so I'm a little confused, because if we're in
Temporary,
temporary compliance with our current zoning.
no, with a conceptual plan, not with the existing zoning.
So my question is, the existing zoning compliant, have we asked that
No.
question? And can you point to where in the law we would then be out of compliance? So what is the minimum amount that we would have to do to become compliant?
We have to create 4,355 more units.
Where is that in the law?
There is a chart on the MBTA Community Act, you can find it online, and it outlines every single community, what they're responsible for creating, how many units. Sorry, this is feedback, and the percentage that we have to put in. So, the state, what? No, the state, no, this is this legislature, that's who voted for this, not us.
Okay.
Yeah, just responding to that question, and let me just point out that, so my client has really nothing to do with this MBTA, state law or even the local, efforts by Framingham, but I think, and this is just my gross understanding, is that the existing zoning in Framingham doesn't qualify, probably because it doesn't allow multifamily housing in these areas by right. I think there are special permit requirements. I may be wrong about that, but.
You are wrong on that.
Okay.
We have an area downtown.
Okay, so I would suggest you talk to the planning department, because I'm sure they've contemplated qualifying what they can from the existing zone. So I don't know any more than that.
So one thing about by right too, by right means that there is no discretionary permits by the planning board or any other agency. If the city council was that authority for doing the permitting, which we could do, then we wouldn't be able to have any discretionary ability to make changes or to say no. By right means that all you're simply reviewing is a site plan. You're reviewing the height, the dimensional regulations, the access and egress, the parking, the circulation, end of story. Everything else is open, whatever the zoning is created. If you're putting in multifamily at 30 units per acre, they can do whatever they want. They can put in apartments, they can put in townhouses, condos, whatever. If you add commercial to that component, then you're opening up a bigger door to more issues in a very dense residential neighborhood. So I definitely am not in favor of adding any commercial component or changing the height requirements. All that would have to be done on the MBTA zoning. What the economic development director has said is he's down zoning, but in fact, this is up zoning. Because now you're increasing the density that's already underlying zoning allowed by increasing it double, adding 6 feet story to these buildings, and then changing by adding commercial component retail, which nobody's gonna want that in Nobscot. So I just think the whole site is inappropriate for this type of development because there is no transportation. It isn't in the spirit or intent of this law. And there's other areas in Framingham that we can be looking at, that makes sense. So, Mr. Chaser.
Thank you, Herb Jason here. So the city council has before it a proposal that includes over 1,100 units right there on Edmands and Edgel. All right, so my question is, Ms. Long, you're going to make a proposal to the city council to probably reject that thing that's in front of them. The question is, the big question is, you're going to suggest 0 units for here, I'm assuming, and then to make up the rest of it in other areas of town. So please discuss your proposal to the council.
So I don't have a fixed proposal yet, but we talked about this Tuesday night on the city council. There's no council that's in favor of putting this in Nobscot. So, and I'm not in favor, and yet I have done. Or the MBTA zoning in Nobscot because it simply makes no sense. If we were to, this is if. So this proposal or the Edmands Road parcel is separate from this discussion. Because I don't believe there's any intent to put this type of zoning in, on this parcel in Nobscot, just because that would, we'd lose all ability to be able to control what goes on. So I don't think that's gonna be on the table at all. So I have different sites, as I said previously, that I think are more appropriate. And I know the economic development director doesn't agree, but I still think Pine Field Shopping Center isn't a horrible idea because there's apartments that back up to that. 990, you could put, there's 50 acres up there. That's where you put density. It's wide open. If you haven't gone up to the Staples Park in 990, take a ride up there. It's a beautiful area, right for development. And nothing's been going on there. There's a lot of blighted, empty office space. Stable came in a few years back when we created the corporate mixed-use zoning, and we did it specifically to help them to redevelop, to put mixed use up there. But unfortunately, again, town meeting didn't agree with putting residential, but everything else is allowed on that property, including height, density, and all the things that MBTA zoning requires. Not to mention the fact that there is an MBTA parking orders, MWRT out there. So that actually is a perfect site for this. There's other sites, like I said, Western Ave, Route 30, there's another area that could be expanded, you know, so, because there are, if you go up towards Route 30 where the clinic is and my hairdresser is, that whole strip, you could put an overlay there. So, I mean, there's so many options, I don't understand why none of those were ever discussed. But I am coming up with several options. There's gonna be 4 planning and zoning meetings starting next Wednesday. I don't know the dates off the top of my head because they're all that skewed, but I'm gonna hold one a week for a month, hopefully, so that we get as much input as possible. So when we come to a final plan, everybody can agree, because right now, no one agrees. Nobody on the city council agrees with the current plan that was recommended by the planning board. In fact, we did not vote to send it to the planning board. Nobody took a vote on Tuesday. That still has to be done. So the planning board can't hold a public hearing until the city council refers it to them for a public hearing. At that same time, the city council will eventually, we can either do it concurrently or so we can hold a public hearing at the same time or not as the planning board. So we have 90 days to make a decision from the date that the public hearing is open. There's a 2-week advertising requirement. So for the planning board to hold a public hearing, they would have been able, they can't do that until the planning board, until the city council refers the article back to the planning board for public hearing. So it'd be 2 weeks from whenever you guys meet. So,
we've got it scheduled for.
yeah, but you can't because we did not vote to have.
It may be a tentative schedule. It's on.
Yeah, I know. It's tentatively scheduled for the 17th. Whether or not, I did ask the city solicitor for an opinion on that because I know for a fact that unless we refer it back to you for public hearing, you can't hold a public hearing or you can't go and advertise for one. So it might be a week further out, and then that pushes the city council beyond the October 29th date that we tentatively were going to have a public hearing. So again, from the date of the public hearing, we have 90 days to be discussing this. So it doesn't have to be done in 2 reads, one after the other. This can be, and it's going to get referred to the planning and zoning subcommittee anyhow in the first read.
Christine, could we take one Zoom question?
Sure.
And can you go on the other, move a little that way? Because I think when the mic gets, the camera gets the.
Here, I'm going to do.
No, I can just mute them.
Okay.
Yeah, just move over that way a little bit. Thank you. All right, so.
Sorry. Closer to the door.
That's
right. The door's open.
I think Magda has a question. Magda, you should be able to talk and.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So my name is Magda Janice. I live in District 5, so nowhere near Nobscot. My house used to be in District 7. after redistricting is different. I haven't moved.
All right, Magda, there's too much feedback, so I'm afraid you're gonna have to ask your question in the chat and then we can repeat it in the room. Okay.
Turn the microphone off.
Turn the microphone off.
I'm just afraid all right, we can try that.
No, it's because we have the sound on in all the rooms.
Oh, okay. We can try one more time. Magda.
Okay. Is it better?
Yes.
I will speak slower, but I'm trying to make a point. I've read a lot of different things. I've interacted with a lot of people who seem to know quite a bit about the law. I believe Mitchell from Planning Board, but I might have the name wrong. He took time to explain things, some of the details of the law. I guess a question or a point is, what are we going to lose as a community if we do not comply with the law? I spoke to the mayor, I asked that question. Unfortunately, it was at the end of the meeting where we ran out of time and I didn't get follow-up questions, but his answer was, there are grants that we will not be getting. Somebody found the document and posted it on Facebook, I believe yesterday. I read most of it. It looks like the grant, one grant that is associated with that specific law is up to 5 million for the community. So it's up to 5 million. It's not 5 million. You have to apply for it. It's available for, I believe, 3 years. The deadline to apply for it for the 25-26 fiscal year is January 15th. So if we make a decision as a community that we're going along with the law and we'll change the zoning, do we have enough time to apply for it? The problem that gentleman from the planning board brought up is that our community, the entire Framingham, has restrictions on what the sizes of apartments and how many can be built in any of the areas, which happen to contradict the law. This is why some of our currently built apartment buildings in downtown and other areas could not be counted because they limited to how many things can be built and what size they can be built. So there is a lot of details that have been either overlooked or missed, at least in my opinion, from where I'm sitting, where I'm reading it. So if the only carrot that the state is dangling in front of our community and other communities is that up to 5 million, if we meet all of the requirements, so it could possibly not happen. And also if we meet the deadlines, which possibly might also not happen, is the whole thing worth following through? I understand it's a law, but if the only reason that we need to follow it is to get that up to 5 million for 3 years, that can only be used immediately next to development that was rezoned. So it's not money we can use for roads in our entire city. It's not money that we can use to improve other things in the city. It's money that would be used only for the projects that are immediately next to the newly zoned areas. I am a little bit confused about why we need to go ahead and rezone half of our city where we've already met more than enough, although not by the details of the law. We need to figure out how it's going to hit pocketbook of people who live in Framingham who are single-family homeowners and small businesses. Having more people might affect small businesses positively. They might get more business. But if our taxes go up to the astronomical sum that for some people might be causing them to move out, is all of this worth the trouble? Can somebody in our government run the numbers and figure out whether we really need to follow the law, or can we forego the grants that might not cover up the additional expense, which is more money in the budget for schools, more money for police department, firefighters, ambulances, and fixing our roads. And those are just the basics. I actually have to go to work. I appreciate opportunity to speak. Again, I already live in the area where the traffic is bad, and I understand all the implications. I just want to know if the city council and the mayor can figure out the numbers dollar-wise, whether this is actually something we have to do, or can we take a chance and say, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Magda.
Thank you.
So what you're asking for is what someone else brought up, there's a cost benefit analysis which has not been done. The state obviously didn't do that when they implemented this law, which it's a shame that didn't happen. As far as not being able to overlay the existing districts, I don't believe that's true, because the MBTA zoning would be an entirely new overlay district, and you would put in the requirements for that district overlay that simply would just be in addition to what's existing. So if you wanted to do an overlay district, then you put in that you could allow any number of bedrooms, you could allow the density, so, but it still wouldn't affect the underlying zoning if someone wanted to opt to use that. So I don't believe that argument that we can't use existing areas that are already zoned for this as an overlay, as long as we create the ordinance language in dimensional regulations and height regulations and everything else that is required by the law. So that's my answer to that. As far as the rest of this is something economic development should have done way back as far as figuring this out. I don't think that the city council is in favor of rejecting this, because we have people on the council that don't think it's worth going there. They think we should just comply. So I don't know if you can convince city councilors of that, but that's my take on the meeting we had Tuesday, that there's not a real appetite for trying to get a waiver. We actually are waiting to see what happens with Milton, because that court action should be, I believe the decision's supposed to be handed down this week coming up. Supposedly it was last week, now it's next week. It should be interesting to find out what happens with Milton, whether they win that case or not, which honestly, I think it's doubtful. So, because it is a state law. Okay.
Just a quick question. So since the emphasis this is all transit related, wouldn't it make sense to your ducks in a row and have a study of having the effects on the transit, get a transit study for this area and all of Framingham, what this is gonna do to the community transit wise? How are the people gonna get to work from this area of town or another area? But also, most important, always gonna go for the kids is the school buses. We already can't get our kids to school. When they level Hemingway or any other school, they're gonna level eventually. Where are all these kids, especially all these extra kids, gonna go? We already have kids that won't go to school. We have a real problem in Framingham. So where is that study? Because I don't think we should be adding to this unless it's, that is resolved. Transit is a major issue. It just, that needs to be a study that could form an extension maybe to this, getting things pushed off for a while until it's actually done. Yeah, the whole thing is transit is my.
I don't believe we can get an extension at this point unless the planning board member knows anything different. As far as I know.
Hey, man. I'm sitting near the door. Mitchell Matore.
Somebody brought up Hemingway, so I just wanted to mention that for those of you who are concerned about our schools, I know that there's definitely a plan, a hope to build a Southside Elementary School. And there's been some talk that, Hemingway wouldn't be there or would be replaced by something, but I don't think we should take that for granted. I would like to see Hemingway rebuilt as an elementary school. We already know the plaza is gonna have new residents with kids. There may be more development at some point, and in any case, I know people in our neighborhood, they want to go to Hemingway, they want to go to Dunning, and they're at capacity, so they end up being bused across town. And so I just, let's not take that for granted. Let's fight for keeping Hemingway where it is and rebuilding it to serve the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because the talk on the street is that they wanted to rip down Hemingway and replace it by putting the school over on Bethany property and then turning that into a, what is it, preschool or pre-K, which makes no sense to me. I live right behind it. That is my district. I can, I'm on Hemingway, so that school is important. I moved for that school. So 30 years ago, because I have a daughter with special needs that they had the best program. So I would not, that school removed and turned into a pre-K.
I guess my biggest point from all of this is I don't understand where the hesitation is to try and fight this. It seems like everybody just rolls over and plays dead. And as that woman Magda had mentioned, it's like, why are we doing this? What is it we're gonna lose? Doesn't our government work for us? We hired them or voted them in. Why aren't we calling the mayor? Why aren't we calling all of our legislators? Why aren't we doing something to tell them that we don't want to do this, whether it's a law or it's not a law? There's got to be some way around this, or at least just inundate them with our opinions, but actually do something rather than just say, well, let's work around it. My 2 cents.
Your 2 cents is valuable. Just so everybody knows, the mayor is actually on the MBTA board. So, which I find interesting because he's definitely, cheerleading to get this done rather than listening to our residents who don't want this to get done.
What's his issue with it that he wants this?
He likes development, I guess. I don't know. I did invite him to this meeting and did not hear back, but obviously I also asked for the economic development director to be here, and apparently the mayor said he could not come. So
Christine, could we take one more Zoom
Yes.
question and then we'll maybe go back and forth?
We'll go back to Zoom, and then I'll go back.
Try and keep the questions brief because I know there's a lot of hands raised in the room too.
One fast question.
All right, so I see that since we were talking about the schools, Mr. Freudberg is in the room on the school committee. Mr. Freudberg, you're unmuted if you want to ask a question.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Steiner. I'm at my son's baseball game, so apologize I couldn't be with you in person. I'm Adam Freudberg. I'm a school committee member. I'm also on the school building committee looking at the future of Hemingway. And I'm tracking this very closely for the need for education to have a seat at the table in everything. No matter what happens with the city council plan, there will be a school impact, whether it's crosswalks, bus routes, enrollment, and more. I wanted to clarify anything about Hemingway. Hemingway is not going anywhere. Hemingway will remain a school property, school-owned property, and a school building. The building committee is looking at how to properly renovate Hemingway, as well as how to fix our imbalance of how many schools are located across the entire city by looking at other sites. But Hemingway is remaining. School committee just voted to make sure that Hemingway remains in the school. School building committee voted as well. It's hard to project exactly, how many years out, what grade levels will we will have different enrollment surges. So it's possible that the grade levels that Hemingway will serve could change a little bit, including expanding by adding a preschool. But either way, I've heard some comments about Hemingway being torn down. That has never been discussed without the actual great replacement of a brand new building to help support that land. So the school building committee continues to meet, and it's a 4 to 5 year process. So this will continue to be evaluated, but the long-term plan does absolutely have Hemingway remaining as a school property and a school building. And before I wrap, just to say that if there's an opportunity for the school committee and council to collaborate here, just like the fire department, police department, traffic planning should all be considered. The schools need to have an importance to the table, and I'm not sure if that's there as aggressively as it needs to be, because what we're talking about doing needs a 2030 plan, a 2040 plan. And we're only seeming to talk about how to comply by a December deadline, when it really needs to be about the master plan and a great long-term plan that has balance for everything, including if you do need to comply fully with the state or if there's a reasonable balance. So I'll close by just thanking Councilor Long, Councilor Steiner, Councilor Ward as well for being here and really tackling this. I think the next few weeks are going to be really critical And thank you for being here. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Ward here?
I think he's in the Zoom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did Councilor Ward want to say anything?
We can, if he raises his hand, I'll let you know.
All right.
Why don't we go back to the room?
Okay.
With the apartments that we have in downtown, a lot of them, from what I heard, aren't even filled. Is that true?
I do not have that answer.
I
Hold on.
I don't.
So you, the planning board.
I'm Mitchell, I'm on the planning board. I don't have that personal information, but my understanding, from what I've been told, is that it's they're about 95% full.
I'm wondering whether, Janice McDonald, I live on Carter Drive. I'm wondering whether the accessory dwelling program could even be considered as part of this. No.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing is that it's not north versus south, in my opinion. I'm just appalled at the enormity of the buildings that were built in South Framingham. And I feel so badly for the residents there. Yes, some of the buildings were old and needed to be redone anyway, but to overload downtown Framingham is not the answer here. And the other thing is, where on earth are we coming from, where I had thought that the parcel that we're talking about with this gentleman, he's representing the owners, was supposed to be R4. So would there have to be a bylaw or a zoning change for it to become an apartment, like a mixed use type? Okay, all right. So in order to do that, then who makes that decision? The council. Okay. It's just too many vehicles, and it's not about traffic downtown. The purpose of this law was to stop vehicular traffic, to slow it down, not have as many automobiles, and to get people to rely on public transportation. Well, first of all, our infrastructure is broken, as we all know. And to try to rely on reliable public transportation, it doesn't exist. And anybody who takes the train can attest to that. So there's so many components of this. We're being so rushed into making a decision by the end of the year. And there has to be some type of appeal that we can put in saying, we're not ready. We don't want to give you a blank check and agree to change our zoning when we don't know what you're going to want to do there or make us do. So let's find a way to put a halt or slow down on this till we get some really reasonable answers. That's all.
Thank you. Christine, we got 2 in Zoom, and then maybe we can go to the back of the room, because I know there's some people. All right, so we'll go to Councilor Ward, and then I see Mr. Doobie is waiting as well. Councilor Ward should be able to unmute.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Where'd you go?
Coming through
Yes,
loud and
we can
clear?
hear you.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you, Christine, Councilor Long, and Councilor Steiner for organizing this meeting. Sorry I can't be there in person. I do have a 11-month-old here at home who's currently napping, but requires me to stay here. I really appreciate hearing from everyone, hearing the comments, and hearing the constructive criticism around how we move forward with this. I don't have much to add other than what I contributed at the city council meeting this week, which is that the current proposal and plan is not acceptable. And there's going to be some work that needs to be done to get to a point where we have something we can work with. I'm looking forward to that process. Looking forward to hearing from the community, and encourage you to come to all the planning and zoning meetings this month, as well as the city council and planning board meetings. I'm not in favor of not complying. I'm just in favor of finding compliance that, puts housing near public transit and along roads and in communities that can handle increased housing. And I will just say, I know we're talking a lot about the change in zoning. Just because we're changing zoning, in some places it means housing is imminent. In some places, I think it's just creating underlying opportunities. So long story short, I appreciate hearing from everyone, and I'll continue to listen for the rest of the meeting today. Thanks all.
Thank you. And then we have Dan.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, Councilor Long, this is a long time trying to get through, so here I go with my iPad. I don't want to repeat everything that people have already said, so I just got a couple of observations listening to the last town council meeting. I'm a little bit of a realist in all this, so to me, it does look like the town council mayor are going to move forward with a plan. The question is, what does the plan look like? And listening to all the other residents of the city, they're all upset at loading the units in their neck of the woods, just as we are in our neck of the woods. And there's a big appetite to kind of spread it around, whether we like it or not. It does feel like the town council will put something in Nobscot, whether we like it or not. Because if you take it out of Nobscot, you got to put it somewhere else. And my sense in listening to the councils, other than the three that are on this call, it does look to me that there's more appetite with the other councilors to move forward, including Nobscot. So that's an observation I have. And I don't know if Councilor Long can comment on that. Second point is, if we in fact are going to have units built, I was going to ask the attorney, is there any thoughts to providing townhomes and condos where people have home ownership rather than stacking large numbers of apartments? I think home ownership is a key development for residents to kind of, start a home, get some ownership involved. Is there any way we can see if that's a possibility? If in fact something has to be built, is that something that we could talk about and move forward on? So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Can he answer?
Can I answer that?
Let him answer the question.
So I can answer that question.
Well,
So.
I'd like to hear from you.
Okay. Oh, from him?
Oh, I love you.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, from what I've heard from my client, they are receptive to lots of different possibilities. And they didn't hire me to come in and dictate a plan or try to present something specific and get approval. They are looking at all options. Townhouses are definitely among the concepts that I've heard from my clients. So right now, with respect to this MBTA zoning amendment process, my client's kind of sitting back and watching. Like, they want to know what the parameters are, what they're working with, and if what they're hearing through this process is townhomes and home ownership are better than other options. Obviously, you have concerns about traffic in schools and visual impacts, I'm sure. So they want to gather all this information and they want to collaborate with the city as best they can. So townhouses, home ownership, definitely on the table.
So let me just clarify, MBTA zoning is by right. Currently, we have special permits on this parcel, on any parcel in the northwest quadrant. That would be 1 acre R4, would be by discretionary permit. If we were to adopt MBTA zoning on that parcel, that all goes away. So a developer can come in and say, yeah, we'll build townhouses, we'll build condos, make you happy, but as soon as the law gets passed, all bets are off. They can come in with anything they want and there's nothing you can do about it. That you lose all control over that property. So this is why I don't think that Nobscot is an appropriate area for this type of zoning. However, if the development, we're gonna, obviously this isn't gonna go away. So a zoning change of minor sorts might be required on that parcel, but it's certainly not something that's gonna be a by right zoning change. So we could change the density, we could allow assisted living, which would be a plus on that. And, but apartments, I just wouldn't want to see that maxed out with apartments. So clustered zoning is available. If they needed more units, you could increase the clustered zoning requirements from 15 units to something else, to more dense. But you don't want to be putting 6-story buildings on that site. It's all granite. There's a lot of elevation changes, there's a lot of geographical features that make it difficult to build, and that also is in the MBTA zoning law, FYI. Yeah, you're supposed to be sensitive to certain areas that have geographic issues that are protected wildlife species, conservation land, wetlands. So there are a lot of different caveats in the law that would, you know, exclude certain parcels for certain reasons. I just wanted to clarify that.
Back.
I'm gonna go to the back of it. Thank you.
I'll be dancing. Thank you, Councilor Long, for your leadership here. I'm Mary Kate Feeney. I'm just gonna stand down the room. I live in Pheasant Hill, so I'm halfway between Nobscot and 990. Just a couple of thoughts. One, putting 7-story apartments or any apartments in Nobscot, and then suggesting also to paper over sections where there will never be and cheating the system are both wrong and the easy way out. And we're better than that. Secondly, I'm very excited by the possibility of building up 990, Route 9. If you look at other communities, that's what they're doing. Burlington, Waltham, Newton, they're going to the Route 9 is our best infrastructure. But Wellesley, yes, Wellesley's doing that. That's where we should be focusing our attention. And I think that that's the right thing for Framingham, is focusing on those same areas. The third point I want to make is that what we're seeing today is a crisis in Framingham where we're not doing our planning and we're not following any of the plans that Framingham has written over the last 20 years. Councilor Long, of course, has been an author of many of them, and they're being ignored. And that's a huge problem, and we need to say better, get better from our government. Fourthly, Nobscot has not been treated well by the city. You know, we don't have that right-hand lane, we don't have that minute clinic. The apartments that are being built here are too close to the road, no bike lanes, all of these things that we've been promised, and then they don't happen. So outside of the MBTA zoning, I have a question for Jeff. Mr. Lawyer, sir. We know that I think we're naive to think that that property is never going to be developed. And as as Dan just said on his call about townhouses, would your client be willing, or would they accept going into a development agreement, which is legal and outlined by the law, with the city of Framingham to hold you accountable to a plan that makes sense for Nobscot and for Framingham that would include townhouses or condos or some sort of home ownership element?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. To be using you for my show. You said everything I think. So,
Christine,
you said that.
I mean, the devil's in the
Yeah,
detail.
well, you said that.
in the back.
Well, we are the devil.
So I just want a clarification on the zoning of that parcel at Nobscot. It can be either 1 acre or cluster zoning at 15 per acre. So even in the current zoning, 450 plus units could go there.
Whatever the calculation turns out, minus geography.
Well,
I don't think that many units would be able to be built there, but I don't know.
under the cluster zoning, that basically speaking, the same number of units that you could build by right could be built on the property in a tighter space. And I don't remember, so it's cluster zoning allows you to shrink things and avoid certain dimensional requirements, but you can't build more units. There may be a density bonus in your provisions, but it's not 15 units per acre calculated over the whole site. It would be within the developable area with an open space requirement.
Currently, right now, how many units could go there?
So they have to do calculations because you have to take out the setbacks, you have to take out there's gotta be a certain amount of open space allowed on it, there's gotta be roadways, there's all kinds of other things. So short of coming up with a plan that shows you, you know, the potential.
The client has done that already.
I don't think so.
I actually,
I don't
they
think
may
so.
know that, they may know, I actually don't know myself.
Yeah, I don't either. I just said, in the past, seen conceptual plans that show, 486 units somehow. So,
Christine, there's a
But-
back, gentleman. All the way in the back.
I just have a really quick question. Thank you, for doing all this work, and I feel like we're asking a lot of you and Adam. Can you let us know what we can do on our end, who we can communicate with, who we could potentially put pressure on to help assist you with this fight?
that would be the city council and the mayor's office.
But
So-
what do we do? Do we write letters?
Yeah, write letters. I mean, we get,
But I would like,
I'm not taking the city council, oh, they're just not into it. I don't take that right now at the face value. I'm Annie Murphy, I live on Edmands Road. And so somehow I just don't trust that all the city councilors are gonna say no to this over here. So what can we do to hold their feet to the fire? And there was a suggestion of a task force. I mean, you got a lot to do, and it's not 90 days, it's less than 90 days. What can we do to help you speed this along? Are we gonna wait for them, city council, to do whatever they have to do to get the planning board to get going? I mean, how long is that gonna take? How can we be assured that this is gonna happen and it's gonna get going? And what can we do to make sure you get the support you need and you're not just doing this all by yourself? And I know you're not, but we wanna help.
so. Did you want to respond quick? All right, so hold on. So what you're saying is a task force, so I've had the subcommittee had a working group, I don't currently have one. If you want to be included in a working group, that would be great to help with this, because our subcommittee, which Brendan Ward, myself, Councilor Ibiani, Councilor Bruno, and Councilor Bryan, that's the 5 people on the planning and zoning. I'm pretty much taking this on as the person that knows more about zoning than probably anybody on the council. So, but any help you want to provide, come to the meetings, make suggestions. I mean, at this point, like I said, we kind of got blindsided with this proposal at the last minute.
yeah,
There was nothing about Saxonville and Nobscot that's even been remotely mentioned from January on. So this just happened at the last hour. I didn't even know. I know the reason for that. We all know the reason why this happened, and it's unacceptable.
Right.
So just because we have certain sites that developers own, that are looking for zoning or want to build. So it's not, and the other thing I want to dispel, the fallacy that this is a paper exercise, that's BS. This is a reality exercise. And if you put a zoning overlay that's by right for apartments and multifamily, trust me, they will come. 20 years on land use boards and another 5 on land use in city council, 25 years in Framingham. I do this in Newton also. If you put it out, they're gonna come. So don't think that they're not gonna build. So you gotta be careful what you wish for and where you put this, because if you put it in the wrong place, you are gonna get what you don't want. So, and I'm in favor of saying no to all this, and I think there's a couple other councilors, but you need to have a majority. And right now we don't, because there's some councilors that think we should just comply. We lose some funding, but again, what's the cost analysis benefit on that? And I've asked this about other questions that I voted against. I'm pretty much always the one guy that votes against a lot of things, and everybody else goes along with it. So my suggestion to everybody is there's a lot of, put pressure on the council, put pressure on the mayor, get together, do what we get. We get hundreds of letters. When people are ticked off about something, they do a template letter, a group letter, and everybody starts barraging us with emails, phone calls, text messages, showing up at meetings. That is how you make an impact. Same thing we did when we were on town meeting, and there's a lot of town meeting members in this, former town meeting members here that are listening to this discussion. So it's not over till it's over. So.
My name is Helene Goodman.
In terms of lawsuits, there is an interesting lawsuit pending by the town of Rockport. It's a federal case that was filed fairly recently, and they are challenging the law on constitutional grounds. So it is a case to watch, but it will not happen quickly, and I doubt there will be any guidance available to you or to the city councilors before the end of the year when the decisions have to be made. Unfortunately, the lawsuit in Milton may not be terribly helpful either, because it addresses a very narrow question about whether or not their old above ground trolley is a subway within the meaning of the law. So have those issues. But I have a question for you about the downtown. I know we've heard a tremendous amount that it is burdensome. Nobody has really explained, other than general traffic concerns, quite what that means. And the initial interim certificate was based solely on zoning overlay for the downtown. It has now been, in the latest proposal, whittled down to about the minimum, which I believe is about 40% of the housing. So is the current thinking just to keep it at that 40%? Or with careful consideration, is there room to bump it up to 45, 50 or something? Northeastern, I believe, was involved in the initial planning or recommendations. Does that team still have any input? Is there an opportunity for them to be involved? So I guess my question is, what is in play in terms of the downtown area?
So currently, the zoning downtown is 90 units per acre. The whole exercise of downzoning was to try to take some pressure off of downtown, quote unquote. So, I lost my train of thought already.
40%.
Oh, so the 40% was determined by the state of Massachusetts. So that number came up depending on how many acres you have, which is 270 acres, and what percentage have you put downtown. So right now, we are required 4,355, but I think the number, what's the number to be exact? It's almost 5,000. Yeah, it's in the latest version.
It's more like
Yeah, it's over. So I would want, it's like 4,500 or something. So I'd love to see that actually brought down to the exact 4,355, because I don't want to give them one more unit that they need. Also, because they want to take pressure off of that, what didn't make sense to me is like 25% goes downtown, but 26% goes to Nobscot? Really? How come we get the bulk of everything and then spread out like 80 units in Saxonville and a couple hundred units here? I mean, we're supposed to get 1,100, almost as much as, half as much as downtown, which is by a train station, which Nobscot isn't. So like I said, this plan will change. There's no way this plan is getting accepted by anybody, regardless of what anybody has thought about accepting. So in the back of the room.
Hi, John Bass, Grove Street. I'll try to be quick so other people can speak or ask questions. First of all, Christine, can you confirm one statistic that gets thrown out? In order to comply with the state mandate, does it have to be a minimum of 15 units per acre?
Yes.
Okay, and so using that formula, we would have to come up with, say, 4,500 units, 15, that's 300 acres. So we have 300 acres along Route 9, Tech Park, all those areas that have infrastructure that makes sense from a transit standpoint, that would qualify. You know the inventory better than anyone.
Yeah, so it's an acres that has to be placed. But
my question is,
so it's 50 acres on 990 in the corporate mixed use, which would be enough. So you got the downtown has 270 acres.
Okay, so
just 32. Okay, so we have it. We have plenty.
So we easily have enough acreage outside of Nobscot to fulfill the MBTA criteria if we choose to do that, correct? Okay,
So we can take Nobscot off the table very easily with respect to the MBTA plan, because you have plenty of other places that are commercial or mixed use already that could carry residences. So I think the woman on Zoom made an absolutely, I think it's absolutely appalling that the Office of Economic Development has not done a cost benefit analysis. That is just malpractice. And we should just, they should be disciplined, they should be criticized. That should not be allowed to happen. You have to run the numbers, as that person said, to figure out what's the additional burden of all these units, what's the additional tax revenues against all the infrastructure investments, schools, roads, all the things people talk about. We should be looking at non-compliance until our own people come up with a believable, credible cost benefit analysis that's peer reviewed, not just put together by the mayor's team. Because the absence of that kind of analysis thus far is not good faith. It is not good faith. And so we need to hold them accountable. And only then do we move ahead with a compliance plan. At the same time, the city solicitor puts together a case and say, we're not going to comply. If it's only $4 or $5 or $10 million, that's peanuts. You cannot buy much sewer, you cannot buy much roadway, you cannot buy enough school space, you cannot hire enough teachers for an extra $5 or $10 million if you add 4,500 units with 9,000, 10,000 residents. We should just say no. We should just say no.
Sounds like a really good slogan. I think I've heard that somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathleen Myers. I'm on Agnes Drive, former selectman as well. And a non-practicing attorney because I'm retired. On Monday morning, the Town of Milton case is going to be argued before the SJC. And the very issue that was brought up by the previous speaker is going to be decided, which is can the state, because what's happening in Milton, because they had a referendum, they withdrew themselves from the plan, they're now compliant. Well, the state didn't just withhold the MBTA funds that the statute requires. There's like 4 different funds. But the governor and the attorney general say, we can withhold all state funds. That's the battle. So that question is not answered yet. Now, if the state prevails, and in my mind, it's unlikely that the town is going to prevail. They have like 8 briefs filed in their favor, 12 of them by housing advocates against them. But we're really not going to get out of it that easily. To me, the 990 thing, just comply. 77 towns are the towns and cities have caved in and complied, and they did the kind of stuff that we're discussing. Put it in 990, put it on Route 9. Stop haggling about it and get off. I mean, I would hate to see us get sucked in to this equity idea that we've got to have the same things in the north side and the south side. A previous selectman, John Stefanini, mentioned the neighborhoods are what's most important in this town. So let's stop with the equity. Let's use some common sense. We've got land that we can use that's not going to impact anybody, and it's going to be close to the transportation, and it's going to give us a reasonable opportunity to get out of this with the least amount of pain.
Well, good.
I'm Jim Lillo, Claudia Circle. As I mentioned at the city council meeting on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, it was Wednesday, just trying to look at alternatives. And I want to understand if city council has the appetite to use the tax rate to discourage future development. My understanding is cities can increase the tax rate on future development because of the cost associated with future development. So we're looking at losing tax revenue by converting commercial properties to residential, which is half the rate. Well, why don't we, nobody in Framingham wants more density. Why don't we consider that all future multifamily housing tax rate is doubled or tripled or quadrupled? There's nothing in the state law, as far as I know, that prevents that. If I'm wrong, I'd like to know. Thank you. And I'd like to know if I'm right, if everybody, if people, how people feel about increasing property tax rates on future development, not existing houses.
So I can actually answer that question because I did ask that question a year ago to the assessor. And no, we can't apply a separate tax rate to their commercial buildings, but they're residential, so there is no, it's against state law, we cannot apply a different tax rate. It has to be the same residential tax rate that the rest of us have on all of these commercial buildings that are apartments. Even though they're residential, they're considered commercial, but they're still taxed at a residential rate. Because I asked that if we could create a separate tax rate just for multi-family apartments, and they said no.
According to the internet, we cannot.
Well, I'm just telling you what the assessor told me. The assessor should know that, the tax collector.
How about if we ask a solicitor to continue?
Well, I can ask the question again, but I already got the answer because that was my thought. So,
We also have a Zoom participant comment. as
Hi,
well.
my name's Carol Delano, and I just want to add that Edgel Road, Edmands Road is not Route 9, 128, 135, where they're building all these apartments. They're farm roads and there's ledges everywhere. So I hope that this developer puts something like the condos or something. I know they have to build something there, but I don't think our not talking handle anything.
They build a senior center.
Just a quick thought, if there are towns that are also haven't complied yet, is there a reason why we couldn't maybe get in touch with those towns and have maybe a group kind of protest thing against this, or is everybody else complying?
So there are a few towns that have joined into the lawsuit, but as our previous speaker on the back, former selectman, has said that those aren't going to be successful. I don't see that as being successful. So the best thing for us to do is try to comply. And again, I don't know why this is so difficult, but 990 is the perfect spot for this. Route 9, you could overlay this along all the apartments on Route 9 or on the Reservoir, Jefferson, that whole area. Believe me, if you're gonna build apartments, you could put it where their existing apartments are and change the zoning for that overlay so that they can increase the density. It's not gonna bother anybody because there are already apartments there, and it gives a lot of those tired old apartment buildings an opportunity to be torn down and rebuilt towards the future. So Route 9, Route 30, 990, the CMU has a strip along Route 9 East. It's up in the 990 corridor. Route 30 has areas that you could use. I mean, this isn't rocket science free. I don't know what's taken so long to come up with this equity stuff, and I agree with Kathy that, you know, this equity's gotta go. We need to find places that make sense in a map for this type of zoning that reduces our traffic, not increases it.
All right, Herb Jason again. I would like to get a show of hands to endorse Christine's plan of Route 9, 990, and that. Can we get a show of hands? All right, now, next question. Is there anybody against that idea? Do I see anybody? No, so there's a message.
Nope.
Anybody in?
Well, that's another question, but at least Christine's got a mandate here for.
Mr. Sullivan, do you want to talk?
Yes, he wants to.
Is the audio muted on Zoom?
You don't know what time we leave on Tuesday.
No, we're only, yep, and
Say it again.
no, we're only at 3, I think.
Oh, no, earlier than 3. Oh, no earlier than 3, and that would include paying our respects. Wow. They live in Sharon, right?
Yeah.
So not that far from Jeff.
Shh, just a minute.
Sir or madam, the chat has been disabled and we can hear nothing from Zoom. Everything is silence.
Is it possible to get Zoom back up and running so we can finish this meeting together?
Unfortunately, I think the device that we were getting audio through, the output was muted to avoid echo from an earlier question. So I don't know without chat that there's any way we're going to get the attention of the folks in the room.
I have messaged Adam Steiner to let him know there's an audio problem.
I also reached out to people in the room, but of course, you can't get called on to ask questions. So looks like we're going to be in the dark for a while.
project that Jeff represents. And we do need to deal with that. This meeting was called about the Nobscot area. And I have a question for Jeff. What is it that the client would like to do up there? We've talked about density and traffic and schools and all that kind of thing. I know when we renovated our house many years ago and had to go before the planning board to move closer to 3 feet beyond our actual border, it was a major issue. This doesn't even, I'm not, sorry. This doesn't even compare to that. And we need to know what's going to happen there in Nobscot, irregardless of the MBTA Act.
So there is no current proposal that I've seen. Again, my client has shown me a lot of different concepts. And what I'm seeing in those concepts are different possible components, assisted living or senior living components that I've heard from some as maybe there would be some support for here. Multifamily housing for sure, townhouses have been part of some of the concepts that I've seen. There was a suggestion, I think, from the planning department that maybe in connection with any development of this parcel, that there be some conveyance of land for an upgraded fire or public safety building. That's, I think, actually within the MBTA zoning provision that was proposed. So there are a lot of different permutations and possibilities. And again, I'm pretty new to the thinking here. I know that you've been at it for a long time with my client. They don't have a specific proposal right now. So if this zoning changes, for example, it's gonna then start evaluating possibilities based upon the zoning that's adopted. If it's not adopted, then we are where we are currently, and it's probably gonna be pulling together some design plans that it would then review with you and with city staff with different possibilities. They want to collaborate. So the question that was asked of me a few minutes ago as to whether my client would be receptive to a development agreement, and I said yes. They've actually proposed that to city staff. They would be willing to enter into a development agreement to define certain parameters, because most of these proposals are going to require a zoning change in one shape or another. That's not total, it's not true with every concept. There are the possibilities of getting variances, there's the 40B law, and there are other ways to approach it. Their preferred route would be a development agreement where there's negotiated and agreed to parameters, and then a zoning amendment, or zoning changes that would accommodate that negotiated deal. So there's nothing specific proposed right now.
Did your client not know that they would need a zoning change when they bought that property?
They probably did, but again, they don't have to. I mean, there is a 40B law out there that you may or may not be familiar with that allows developers to come in. I think this building was a 40B development, right? So they could, if they wanted to, proceed under the chapter 40B law, which has, you know, there are reasons why people don't want to do that, but if they hit one roadblock after another, that is an avenue that's open to them. So I think they bought this property because they viewed it as having good development potential. I know you all disagree with that. There was an economic development study done for this area, and one of the things it recommended was building more residences in this area, including multifamily units, to support retail businesses in the area, within a walking distance. And that's part of the economic development.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
I didn't write the study, I just read it yesterday. It's the RCG study for 2019. I'm just saying, the one.
Then when you leave this meeting and tell me what retail is that needs more business.
Yeah.
You can't get into CVS, and Murphy's is plenty busy.
So the 40B law is if we fall below the 10% inclusionary zoning requirement that we have adopted. And currently, yeah, we're over 10%. So, and we actually required 13% in this Nobscot, and then there's a, excuse me, workforce component too. So I think it totals like 23. Some high number of affordable housing, whether it be workforce housing, which is not subject to a government voucher, or affordable housing, which is for those people who possess a government voucher. I actually work for affordable housing in another community, so I know a lot about that. I've been doing this for a decade. So we don't fall below that, so you can't use that.
Nice try.
So, but it would, as Jeff has said, it would require some sort of a zoning change, but at least it would be a zoning change that we could control. We could put special permit authority on, that wouldn't be a by right option. So again, that's great to have a development agreement, but that's not to say that that means you're gonna get what you want. No offense. But I've been fighting that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Councilor Long, and for Councilor Stein, who was here earlier, for putting this together. And to Jeff as well for being here. You know, I really appreciate the outreach and the willingness on behalf of this developer to come have these conversations. Because originally, when this community sort of discussion around this started, it was because there was a proposal trying to sneak inside for something that was grossly inappropriate for this neighborhood. So I do want to acknowledge that. I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate them being willing to consider things like a development agreement going forward. That said, that is a going forward conversation. The urgent thing in my mind right now is this MBTA law. You know, we have a hard deadline that is under 3 months away. That is not a lot of time to put together a reasonable plan that is going to work for all of our community's needs. And, you know, we can say a lot about why we've arrived at this point, less than 3 months away of having this conversation with this last minute bait and switch on this proposal. That's again, a conversation we're gonna need to have later. But right now, the urgency here is finding a path forward. And there is a lot of appetite here to fight the legal requirement to have a plan at all. There's also a path forward of putting together some sort of plan that we're going to have to acknowledge will be in place. I'm not going to advocate today for one way or another. It sounds like there's a lot of different suggestions that I encourage people right into your city councilor, right into the council entirely with whichever way you suggest, because the more communication that we can get on record of the community's appetite, that at the end of the day is what's going to sway the outcome here. It's not this community meeting, it's not these dialogues, it's not us up at the microphone. It's how much actual tangible outreach we can get to our city council members, to the mayor, to express what the community wants. So that's my point number one. Please don't just take this meeting, walk away, but sit down, make the time this week to draft up a letter, whether it's only a couple sentences, it doesn't matter. Email it in, send it over, get your voice and your opinion heard. My other point is, you know, it was referenced that economic development plan from 2019, which was refreshed, I think, last year with some updates. It does call out that the area of Nobscot has some opportunity for development, and we have done so. We have that new development going up at the plaza right behind CVS. We are adding 158 units in that space. There's going to be retail on the first floor. There are actions that are being taken in that direction, but there is possible to do too much and to then overbuild in a location that is neither built for it with infrastructure, nor appropriate from the actual sentiment of what this area and this neighborhood wants to be, why we all bought here. You know, I bought right on the corner of Edmands Rd and Gennardi because I loved being across from a farm. I don't want to be behind my barn, you know, having 1,000 units or even 500 units. So to me, right now, figuring out what a plan is going to be with this MBTA law specifically should be step number one. Once we have a plan there, then we can engage in conversations about what this specific parcel might look like in the future. But for right now, MBTA should be the focus. Let's get a plan in place. Let's use what's called out in that development plan. You know, it specifically called out how many under or unutilized industrial zone and parcels are in Framingham, some of which have, say, contamination issues, which make them undesirable to build. Well, if we're going to have to put some parcels together for by right zoning to build, can we use those? Can we beautify Framingham by taking those ugly eyesore locations that might be challenging to build on and serve those up as opportunities? Because if it's gonna be an issue to try and build there, we might as well put it in for a developer who has more benefit of having that by right zoning at the end. So there's a trade-off factor there. Can we leverage those zones? Can we use these plots? And I appreciate so much what you're doing here, Councilor Long, in trying to advocate for places like 990 or Speen Street or Shoppers World. You know, we have a chance to try and do something that makes sense for the city according to the actual economic development plan that was put forth for this city. So next steps on that, I plan to attend every meeting that we can socialize. Thank you so much to Vincent and to Tony as well for coordinating the mailing list. If you are not on that list, go to the website, sign up, get yourself on it, because it will inform you of when additional meetings are going to take place. Let your friends and family know who live in the area so that they can also sign themselves up. And let's see what we can do in the next month, as quickly as we can, to get something workable together, because right now the clock is running out so fast on this MBTA issue. We have to get something together. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Oh, I'm gonna take care of that. I don't know what I can do. Katie.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, well, that's my new press secretary.
So, John Zombeck at Community Road. I'm gonna ask the question you never asked the butcher about sausage, but like, how is the council going to make this decision? For the MBTA one? Can you walk us through the process and?
So what's going to have to happen, and it's already started because I said this at the last city council meeting, is planning and zoning will be holding meetings to change this map to come up with something that we think makes sense for Framingham. During the public hearing process, and these are not public hearing, these are public meetings, so everybody's invited from all over the community to come in, give us input, because we want to get it right. Because this is going to affect the entire community. It's not just about Nobscot. It's not about Colburnville. It's not about Pheasant Hill. It's not about Saxonville. This is about all of us and how the community character will end up being changed. One thing I wanted to go back to was this thing about the Northeastern study. So the people in Northeastern, if I'm not mistaken, are students that were doing this study.
I think it's students led by a professor.
Yeah, students led by a professor. Now, they're not actively working in Framingham, looking in Framingham. We live here. So we all should know what we want, what we don't want, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. I was just astounded that you would hire students who have never had any life experience working on a construction site, working on actual zoning or planning or economic development, to be presenting us with a form-based zoning presentation of what we should do with our property. I mean, are you serious? So, you know, first of all, we have Euclidean zoning, which is focused on keeping the character of the community and creating different zones all over our community so that we have different options. We have areas that have a lot of open space. We have areas that are close to retail and shopping and have a lot of transportation. We have areas where we have a train that are dense. That people want to move there for multi-housing because they can walk to the train. So there's different options in Framingham. So form-based zoning throws that all away. Form-based zoning speaks strictly to the building. Every building is pretty much the same. So it does not look at community character. It does not look at maintaining the fabric of your community. So that was my first concern with that. And I was told, well, don't worry about that. We're just coming up with a map. But you know, to me, this plan kind of reflects what form-based zoning, because I work in Newton and I'm looking at what's going on in Newton, and people are leaving Newton because it's destroying their community. They've got Needham Street, Washington Street, Walnut Street, every Chestnut Street, everywhere you go in Newton, you can't avoid new construction going on, tear downs, redevelopments. The whole block of Washington Street from Lower Newton Falls from Newtonville going almost to the center is just being decimated. All big buildings going up. So everything is, you know, all the buildings that are being rebuilt, all the old Federalist style homes are being torn down to put in these modern, to me, ugly buildings that are way denser. So the other part about this fire station, why would we want to move the fire station to that parcel from where it exists, regardless of whether it's in a flood zone or not? And I know it is because I'm in the same flood zone, because I'm right behind that fire station on Hemingway. Why in the world would we care that the mayor wants to put the fire station in an area that would be, talk about creating a bigger problem for traffic, putting fire station on a parcel? Where's it gonna exit, and how's it gonna come in and out? What's gonna happen every time the fire? To me, that's just the risk. I would not want to see, and I wouldn't approve anything to put a fire station on that property. That property does not belong, that does not belong on that property. So I just wanted to address that before I go to the next.
I saw your pictures from them.
Oh,
Wow,
I'm
process.
sorry. I'm sorry.
I enjoyed it.
So we have to come up with this plan. Have to do it, you know, so I'm informally holding a regular meeting. We'll go to public hearing. During the public hearing process, that's when everybody gets.
Oh, God.
and voted. So again, we don't have 90 days, we have 60 or whatever. We're trying to get this done by somewhere, you know, hopefully mid-November. Get a plan voted, but that's where the public comes in, because you come in and comment on what you want, what you don't, go to the planning board meetings.
Awesome.
The planning board will-
Does Axwell
give
seem
amendments.
to, like, from
Now,
your
your input and your recommendations is where that gets amended and then sent back to us, and if we agree with it, that's great, if we don't, the city council will make further amendments to that, but the city council, at the end of the day, ends up voting, and it is only a majority vote. Because
You're
under
on
the
Zoom.
MBTA
Can we
zoning
mute, please?
law, we took away the super majority vote, so it used to be 2/3.
Private conversation is going like this.
Yeah. So that's why this is really important. Everything has been dumbed down, simplified to get this passed, whether you like it or not. So again, that's the process. The planning board will hold their hearings, their planning board hearings. The city council will be holding hearings, come to our meetings.
This year.
The public
This
hearing.
year.
Don't think that, you know.
This
the city
year, yeah.
council
Normally we go
is gonna
multiple
just
times a
rubber
year.
stamp
Right,
what the
right.
planning board gives us.
I don't
because
think we
it's
will,
not gonna happen.
unless his friends are going and then we want to discuss.
Right.
Can you mute yourselves if you're on Zoom,
Yeah,
please?
but does he seem to enjoy it more as he gets older? Or no? Okay.
The others, did you?
I'm
did
going
you
to.
start feeling the other zones that they're having meetings like we're having, how are those meetings going?
Well, that was what was interesting, because we never got, nobody reached out to us. So, but I know that Colburnville, we had met over there, and I don't know where else they met. But it seems like there wasn't enough outreach, because this is an important change to our community, so there should have been way more meetings and way more outreach. So I'm just taking it on at this point, because we gotta get this done one way or another. So in the back of the room.
I can talk now. I'm Sue Grant, I live on Highland Road. The woman who last mentioned a website that you can link to get more information, and you talked about emailing council members. Is there a possibility of one location with all of the email addresses and the websites that can be sent out to people who are accessed? I'm sorry.
The person sitting
Yeah.
over there?
I'm not comfortable giving out email address, but I can help distributing.
Yeah, I guess if you're
Yeah.
saying to reach out to the council members, there's 11 of them, and I think it may be difficult for some people to find all those names and all, but if there's one like last that went out.
You can click a button to get all city council.
Correct.
Okay.
On the website.
So why don't you visit our website? We should have all the information on the website, yeah.
And one question, so I went to the meeting, I'm new to this whole thing,
Sure.
I kind of had my head buried in raising my children, and now my kids are gone, and I live off Edgel up near Route 20, and the traffic in this area is horrendous. I do home care, and I try and drive around the town all day, and it can literally take me a half an hour to get from this area to someone down south, and I appreciate that nobody wants it in their neighborhood. I was a little concerned at the council meeting, because it seemed like some of the council members representing the south side, one of the women was talking about not wanting the 40% in her district. But that's a mandate with this law, so it has to be down there. And then you're looking for taking the other 60% and trying to put them in other areas. I think I'm gonna be unpopular right now, but I feel like it's naive to think nothing is gonna happen to this parcel. And I kind of feel like choose the least of all evils. I would much prefer to have a 400 unit build versus an 1100 unit build. And I don't know, and I'm new to this, and I don't know a lot, and but if this developer, if it can be locked down and do something sooner rather than later, and already be committed to maybe I don't know, maybe I'm sorry.
No, you're not understanding. So the MBTA zoning, the way this current proposal is, would double that to 1,100 units. It would allow commercial, allow a height increase, it would allow a lot of things that we don't want. So we're not saying that we may not, we're probably gonna have to entertain some sort of other zoning change aside from this. This proposal should not be even involved with that. I invited Jeff because I knew the neighborhood was gonna be here and it was his opportunity to let you know, he's now representing the developers and they're interested in hearing what the neighborhood wants and what they don't want. Before it was like, you're getting this whether you like it or not. Now it's like, hey, we're gonna play ball. So.
Christine, let me ask you, are you personally in favor of rejecting the MBTA zone?
I don't like it, but.
Would you vote to just reject it? Well, I mean, the town, as I understand it, the city council can just reject it, is that? Okay, so would you reject it? Okay, so, and John was making the point before, until an economic analysis is done, we don't have the data, we don't have enough knowledge to know whether or not to reject it, but why give up right now on the idea? And then the other question I have is Adam still here?
No.
Which specific councilors might be convinced to vote to reject it? And those are the people where we should be focusing our efforts in trying to campaign to get those people to vote against it. If it turns out that that's, the best alternative. I mean, I hear everybody in the town saying, we don't want it here, we don't want it here, we don't want it here. So if the whole town is saying, we don't want it here, why are we buying into this? Why are we letting the MBTA cram 4,000 units down our throat when we just built 3,000 units in the last few years?
So from my take on everybody on the city council, there would be probably me, Adam, and 2, 3. There's a few people on the council that want more housing. So they would not be in favor of it, but the majority, I'm pretty sure, not want to name names, but I think you might get close to a majority who would be wanting to vote against it, but I also know there's people on the other side, there's probably 5 that wouldn't be interested in trying to reject this. So it would be close, there might be one swing vote in there. That's my take on it. I mean, offline, I've heard, oh, we want to reject it, and then we go to meetings like, no, we gotta do this, so I don't know. So. Hold on.
I just want to point out that every time we add individuals that live in apartments, they have different needs than us homeowners. So I think probably most of the people here are homeowners, and especially in this part of town. And think about the dilution of your vote when we add 1,000 apartments along with the 150 over there. And it's just common sense that people have different needs. And as they keep changing the demographics of the town, your homeowners and people that are paying the taxes that are higher usually than the other thing, there is no advantage to being a homeowner in Framingham if they keep going the way it is, because your vote is not going to be worth it. And I think people need to remember that. This is one development that they're proposing for a year on this side. I don't know the exact numbers, but just think about how many houses it takes to get 2,000 voting people. And I can stand, if I live in that apartment, I can stand at the front door and talk to everybody on their way out. But to try to reach all of you type of people, we just talked about it now, try to reach all these neighborhoods and all of that. So it's much easier for people to share their common needs, especially when you put the high density. And so this stuff is going to change the town for good. And people don't talk about that a lot, but that's what's happening. It's already happening because you already have people that have different needs. And now what are they, 50%? 45%? And then if people don't vote or get organized because they're too busy with kids or family, or they have health problems or whatever. So think about that. You're permanently changing this town. The whole reason we grew up here, the whole reason we came here, that's the reality. And that's why I'm saying, like he said, I'm saying no. Because we can't dilute it any further, not put it over here or put it there or whatever. You gotta stand up and tell the state that we've had enough here. And so even if we lose, it buys time, it sends a message, and maybe other people get some strength, stand up, maybe they're going to, what do you call it, I'm not a lawyer, class such a once, and they're saying, oh, we're gonna lose the money and everything else, sometimes you just have to make a stand and lose things. But that's why I changed it. Because I don't think there's any other thing that's gonna come with it, they're gonna build a lot of stuff that's gonna change the fabric of the community, period.
One other thing that came up relative to this, someone said something about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. There's now another revision that's coming up on that, that's gonna take away any special permit that's on that, and I don't remember if, did you guys put a special permit on ADUs? Because I voted against that.
I don't remember what the state is.
Yeah, so the state's changing that again, so that it's gonna be even easier to build ADUs, and, you know, accessory dwelling units are supposed to be for like here, but apparently it's gonna end up being apartment cities. So, which is why I voted against the ordinance, so. It was a 10-1-0 vote, so I'm like the outlier on city council that keeps voting against everything. So Central Street, I voted against that, another 10-1-0 vote. Then if you buy an affordable housing unit because somebody thinks they're gonna have a park down there. So there's just a lot of things that aren't making sense to me as a planner and as a zoning person and as a former business owner and homeowner. And to the point, previous speaker, the majority of money for taxes is this end of town. Northwest Quadrant has the biggest tax burden because we have the most expensive properties and we pay the most amount of tax. So, you know, they can say we're NIMBY or whatever, but we're supporting this economy primarily with business owners. There are other areas of Framingham that have high-end taxpayers too, but the bulk is down here. And also for elections, just so you know, District 1, 2, 3, you don't win those districts, you don't win an election. So anyway, any other? Right.
Thank you, Christine. I just want to echo something the other speaker said, you just alluded to, you know, if you look at Framingham as an enterprise, we're the primary investors. Most of the people here's homes are worth $500,000 or more. There are probably $10 million worth of properties around the Nobscot development alone. And this is just one part of the city. We're all investors. We should not let the state dictate what we do when we believe it's an overreach, or it's a one-size-fits-all that doesn't take into account that there are well-intentioned people in Framingham that know we need more housing. That's a given. And the state is only mandating 40% within the commuter rail half-mile radius, and the other 60% we have to figure out for ourselves. I think we need to pursue parallel paths, figuring out how to comply, but also how to convince the city council people that are in favor of this for good reasons, right? They need more affordable housing, and there are good reasons for that. Let's talk to those city councilors and let's get the mayor's office to come up with a cost benefit analysis, figure out what would we lose if we don't comply versus what we would gain if we do comply. And then figure out, take that to the city councilors that are in favor of this and say, look, here's the deal. You really think this is the best deal for your constituents? It's not, because of this, because of that, because of the other thing. You know, if we can talk to the city council people and say, this is not in your constituents' best interest. We've been doing pretty well on our own by adding thousands of units in the last few years. We don't need the state to come here and tell us how to do it, because we have council people here, we have citizens here that are already doing it without this stick that the state is imposing. So let's figure out how to do it the way we want to do it. And if we think we can do it the way we can do it by compliance, okay. If we don't like that, then let's convince the city council people in favor of this and the mayor why it's not a good deal for us. And as investors in this enterprise we call Framingham, No, we're the stockholders here. We should have the ultimate decision, not the state. And that's just the way it's gonna be. And, you know, sometimes you just gotta play hard.
Anybody else, or I think we've exhausted this subject? Jeff, do you have any closing remarks?
I don't know if I do. But I will say thank you for inviting me to this important neighborhood meeting, and I really do look forward to working with you. I welcome hearing all the concerns, and it was educational for me, so thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody that took their time out today on a Saturday, which I'm sure there's other things you prefer to be doing, but I appreciate everybody's input, and contact all your city councilors. Planning board.
58 Good Drive, and I'm on your email, but I need to sign. I signed it. Go.
Okay, actually, he just left. So for those of you who need it, leave me, yeah. Yeah, so we actually have more than 50 we're gonna distribute, but this meeting kind of ran at this point, so.
So your email